my wife and I moved to buy our dream house in Pebble Beach, California, and we move in. It's in Pebble Beach. It's a wet climate. It's not an old house. It was built in 2001. And when the heat starts to run, we feel tired. Noses start to run. Feel exhausted. Complain. Time passes. We're really exhausted. Well, we blame it on the fact that we have a new baby because my wife's a psychologist. We should know. Of course it's a baby. But by winter, we have these unusual health symptoms. Hives start to show up, sensitivities to things that we were never sensitive before, unusual reactions. Even the dogs had them. And then I couldn't hold a 10-digit phone number in my head long enough to dial it. I became so exhausted I fell asleep in meetings. I couldn't think clearly to run meetings. I began to think I had had a brain injury and I would need to sell my 100-year-old family business to support my family. That's literally how deep we were. Adriana could no longer get pregnant. Our baby had green stuff coming out of her nose all the time. And finally, the doctor said, you should test the house. So we did. And I tested everything. We found a lot of mold in the house. Turns out the builder had taken a lot of shortcuts. There was a lot of moisture intrusion, and it was a damp, wet climate. And internal occupancy was higher than the house was used to. So we know the story, right? Wolfgang Feist just talked about it. Homes accumulate outdoor pollutants 5 times higher. Homes are full of chemicals with which we build, and then we add personal care items and cleaning supplies. So these beautiful homes that we love sometimes become a container of harm instead of our protector. So what do we do about it? We build it tight, as we do in Passive House, and ventilate it right. We can clean it up. We can make the air cleaner. If you change the air, you can change your health. So I had happened to run a 4-generation company, 100 years old. I've been the chairman of the FSC. And the reason I mention that is because in the FSC, we watched the power of consumer demand transform global markets. And my wife was a doctor, which gave us a particular medical understanding of the situation. And we had this 100-year-old company, so we could afford to do something about it first on behalf of builders. And what we said to ourselves initially is we need to build principles of a healthy home, not complex principles like Passive House and Living Building Challenge, but kind of K through 12 to bring builders into the discussion at a simple level. So continuous fresh air, properly sealed and insulated, less toxic material, cleanable surfaces, and healthy home habits. And those can be used in the way the principles of the FSC can to define healthy home. So I want to talk about continuous fresh air. We built the first Passive House, this Passive House took us through it, to these principles. And we spent 2,000 hours studying the building materials to make sure we had the lowest possible off-gassing materials that we could find. So we were pretty proud of ourselves. When we moved in, we thought, wow, let's run the ventilation, let's run testing equipment, and this is expensive Wolf instruments. The TVOCs ran around 250 in the beginning with ventilation on. But when we turned ventilation off for 2 days, they accumulated to 1,300. And let me tell you, that is a headache-creating environment. That's a difficult environment to be in. But with a Zender HRV, in relation back on, you can see they came back down to really low levels within an hour. Okay, so we lived with these instruments in the house, and they went tick, 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 and my wife really didn't like that. But if the instruments weren't running at a good ventilation rate, those little peaks, which were the daily living, would have grown very high. And in this case, they stay low because the ventilation's high. And by keeping them low, we're reducing the total weight on our body from the toxins and the building materials, moisture and dampness, and other things that affect human health. So we've known this for a long time. For how long have we been saying, I can't think clearly, I just need a little fresh air? Well, as long as we've been in conference rooms and buildings. Fortunately, Harvard studied this. In the cognitive study, which they released 4 years ago, they looked at the air quality in the average office building, and they studied cognition with a 45-minute cognition test, this being the outcome of these categories. And then when they compared that to air quality when it was really high quality, low CO2, under 800, low particles, low VOCs, you could see that cognition improved anywhere between 60 and 260%. Well, that's stunning if we think that the way in which we design our home affects our cognition. I sometimes suggest to architects if they keep designing homes as they do, they'll continue to dumb down their clients. 60 to 260% improvement, also 12% productivity improvement, and 20% improvement to sleep quality, which was measured with wearables. Okay, so that meant I, as an employer, the environment that my people work in the day affects their quality of life at night, and their home affects their ability to function. So we invented Hayward Score, and we went back into my experience at FSC, and we pulled from the quiver of transformation and said, let's create a transformation tool that can identify the health of the house in a number, in the way that the J.D. Power Safety Score for cars does. So if you were to go to haywardscore.com and spend 15 minutes, you would see 50 of 300 total questions. It would ask about where you live. We'd enter a climate zone. We'd look at what your home's made of, how often you run your range hood, do you run the bath fan, how often you shower 10 minutes or longer, where you store your chemicals, do you vacuum, do you have pets, how old's your carpet, everything that has to do with the health of the house. And then we aggregated those in a complex set of algorithms that begin with Wolfie and evolved over 2 years to a description of the home as a working system. And from that, again, free, you get a 5-page report that tells you how to fix your house, how to make it healthy, what your score is, likelihood of it's impacting your health, and it's based on the climate you live in, a climate-specific solution, lo and behold. So consumers love it. When we launched it, they started getting it all over the nation. Today we have 78,000 completed Hayward scores, and you can see they come from where people live, plus a couple of moldy metros like Texas, Florida, and California. 78,000 homes scored, largest database correlating health, symptoms, housing, and occupant habits ever created. And our clients are people who are trying to get access to the health highway, military, home builders, manufacturers, research institutions who want to engage their customers in health. So why is this such a big deal? Dr. Corsi is a very famous IAQ, indoor air quality specialist, and he wrote this up. If you live to be 79, it turns out you spend 69 of your years indoors, hence the 90% statistic, 54 at home, 26 in bed. And bed is very important because this is where our body resets. So if we sleep under assault at night in the master bedroom from dampness, mold, dust mites, bad. It disrupts the body's ability to be healthy. So here's the stuff that you really came to this presentation to see. After 3 years and 78,000 scores, we can publish data we feel confident about. And you can see on the right that the houses in the fourth quartile best score 75. And you can then see self-reported symptoms. And then if you move to the left, the score goes down, second quartile 39, 11 being bad, and you see nearly a doubling of health symptoms. People tell us when they leave the house, these symptoms go away. And in the bottom 25%, they tell us in the morning 2.3 symptoms go away only to return when they come back. This is a stunning thing for doctors to look at. So if there was doubt in the industry that homes affected health, it was probably only because the studies were small. They had 30 homes, 60 homes, maybe 100. Never 78,000 homes. We have revealed the truth about health and housing. Forever, housing, affordability, and health are inseparable. And that changes the whole discussion of passive house and why health matters and why passive house saves health expense. We'll never forget, if you were around, the gas lines in the 70s, and we shall never forget COVID and what's on our elevator button and what's in our air. But most importantly for us, what's in our air, where it comes from, and how it gets in our house, and how it affects our health. And so I believe we can use the power of health to inspire the market to live in passive houses and demonstrate that. Turns out if you just have a COVID-specific discussion, when houses stay between 40 and 60% humidity, as mine does with an ERV, you're less likely to see a spread of COVID and other things. A lot of hospital studies have laid on that. When you're less exposed to particles and chemicals on a daily basis, particularly particles, you have greater resilience to COVID in general. Wouldn't that be a nice attribute for those of us who live in passive houses? And now that home is the workplace and school is the workplace, and we're at school, at home for school, CO2 in the house becomes a big factor. Volatiles in the house are a big factor. Anxiety, depression, all these things happen in homes with bad air. So my ask of you, we have 78,000 homes. We have a database that empowers comparing houses. If we can get 250 passive house owners to get their Hayward score, it's free, it's confidential, we don't share it, we aggregate it. But we would have a study on passive homes, and I'm confident they would be far to the right of the homes that score 75. My house scores a 95. And at least in preliminary work, we've seen that people in passive houses cook a lot more, show a lot fewer symptoms, a lot healthier, less dust, fewer leaks, probably better quality builders. A lot of things would come out of that, and I would love to help accelerate the movement to build more passive houses by linking passive house to health. We did a quick thing using Hayward score data where we looked at affordable entry-level market force housing and what it would cost to take an affordable house from code to healthy. And we came up with the 12 elemental steps. These are on our website. You ask for the top 5. Ventilation, ventilation, ventilation. 0.5 ACH. We need to be above that 0.3 that we like so much with passive house. And I tell you, you need it just to overcome the off-gassing of chemicals in the first 2 years. An easy, cheap step, plywood, no OSB, no particle board, solid paint, no foam insulation. For kitchen, induction range and effective kitchen ventilation with makeup air. And makeup air is particularly important in a passive house where there is no extra air. 100% sealing between the garage and the house, and execute a comprehensive dust protocol before occupancy. HEPA vacuum, white HEPA vacuum. I came up with the garage protocol after my own experience. I bought a London cab and I put it in my passive house. It's measured at 0.6. And we found that in the garage, we had 5,400 parts per million when the taxi was sitting there, and 11,000 when it had just been driven and it got in the house. I followed it with theatrical smoke to see how. And then I found from a blood test we did that some of the chemicals were in my bloodstream. So even passive house at 0.6 isn't tight enough for the garage house connection. And I just finish by saying something that is so near and dear to my heart. I, like you, was so concerned with sustainability and energy, and I sold sustainability, but I only got 13% of the population of the market. FSC taught me about consumer demand, and health taught me that 60% of the market will come to the table when it's about their health. And so now, if we can make all homes healthy, they become energy efficient, and we have a way to cut 30% of the global carbon footprint. And if all homes were healthy, it would change the demand for toxic chemicals, and that would be good for the planet. And finally, if all homes were healthy, the American public would save $700 billion a year as we calculated on healthcare expense. And that money could be used to finance transformation to carbon efficiency. And that's the end of my message.
Major.